Tamriel and the world of Nirn has had a long, bloody history of races fighting each other over a multitude of things, from small land grabs to political retaliation, and it can even be due to races simply not liking each other's way of life. This has led to tons of wars over the many eras, with factions being set up to bolster their forces and fortify their own lands. However, that isn't the only problem that the people of Nirn suffer from. In fact, behind the scenes in other planes exist Daedric Princes, godlike beings capable of things mortals could only dream of. These beings live within their own part of the universe and aren't always evil. Some can bring their powers to the people of Nirn, allowing them to be healed, give guidance, and bring life to the world. However, others only look to cause mass destruction and create chaos, as well as take over the whole of civilization. The most notable of these Daedric Princes is known as Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric Prince of Oblivion, whose sole purpose in life is to take over the whole of Tamriel and bring death and destruction to those living within Nirn. But what is Dagon's background? What makes him unique compared to the other 17 Daedric Princes? How did he trigger the Oblivion Crisis, and where is he now within the 4th? Going into the 5th era. And if you do enjoy this video at any point, please make sure you like and subscribe for more Elder Scrolls videos or just lore videos in general. And with that, let's dive into the lore behind the Daedric Prince of Oblivion, known as Mehrunes Dagon. For many, if not all of the Daedric Princes, it is unknown what their origins truly are, why they were created, or what they would put on their plane of existence to do. For Mehrunes Dagon, this is all up for interpretation. Down on Nirn, he is known as the Black Daedra Lord, the Lord of Change, Prince of Ambition, Prince of Disaster and Destruction, the Master of Razors, Sovereign of Destruction, the Flame Tyrant, the Father of Cataclysm, the Golden Flame, the Flame Father, and last but not least, the Merpride's End. All of those combine into ultimately the Prince of Darkness and Destruction. But was that his sole reason for being created? And why is he the way he is? One would have to just say that yes, as his actions show it, especially throughout the recent eras. But we unfortunately cannot know the truth of why he was made. The only thing that points to why and when he was created was in the book known as the Mysterium Xarxes, a book used within the 3rd era of Nirn to help recruit members of Mehrunes Dagon's cult known as the Mythic Dawn. Within this book lies only one mention of the prince's origins, which is up for much speculation, but it is oddly specific and most likely gives us the one and only answer to how he came into being. This tomb, which was written by Dagon himself, according to the commentaries, goes on to say that the divine beings known as the Magnagi, who fled Nirn soon after its creation by the architect known as Magnus, were the ones who created Dagon in what was named the very bowels of Lig. Lig was a sort of parallel realm to what Tamriel was, ruled by the Dreg in the Dawn era, but also the domain of a deity that was simply said to be known as the Upstart who vanishes. Regardless of what Lig really was and how it turned into the realm ruled by Dreg kings who enslaved the oceans, Mehrunes Dagon was said to have been created here, but originally he was not the Prince of Destruction or known for his evil ambitions. Instead, Dagon's whole creation by the Magnagi was to be for good. He was going to be titled the Prince of Good, and upon his creation was imbued with Oblivion's most precious asset, that being hope. Soon after his creation, Mehrunes supposedly started a revolution and overthrew the tyrant dregs, eventually toppling their most significant towers, as well as destroying all of their great cities and slaughtered all of the Templars who followed the deity known as the Upstart. Together with his legions, Mehrunes Dagon spread hope all throughout Lig as it spread like a bushfire, and thanks to his actions, this world was set free from the destruction of the Upstart and the Dreg. This was a major victory, and because of it, Mehrunes was given the title of the Sea's Flame Redeemer. That said, this was still just a story within a book that could be up for a ton of interpretation, especially as it was written by Dagon himself. Another story up within Skyrim goes on to claim that Dagon used to be known as the Leaper Demon King, and came up with a plan with a greedy man to hinder Alduin the World Eater, slowing down his process of absorbing the world each time. Realizing that these two had planned to betray him and stop him in his overall ambition of eating the world and resetting it fully each time, Alduin would go on to curse the King of Leapers, calling him Dagon in the process, with the greedy man being trapped within a mountain that no longer existed in this world as he hid from the mighty dragon. With Alduin now able to eat the rest of the world, the once Leaper knew that because of it, he would never be able to jump with joy and happiness ever again. This was unless the world was brought back and put into place once again. And also, he knew that being cursed with the name of Dagon, this once kind being would now be one that had to destroy and destroy and destroy whenever he could find some small escape from his new home in the Oblivion. Regardless of what Dagon's true origins are, his new ambition was to look to the world of Nirn. Here he would go on to create a construct known as the Netherivigum that was set up to draw people in to put them through a trial. Anyone who ventured to this construct would be put through this specific trial, and if they were to succeed in it, they would be seen as worthy of wielding the dagger artifact known as the Mehrunes Razor, which was believed to be created by the fusing of lesser Daedric entities by Dagon himself. Located out within Cyrodiil, a group of ancient Aelids would not only find this trial area, but they also believed they were capable of warning people about the trial and would be able to send them away and resist the urge of the trial and those who sought out the razor within. In response to this, they would create a city surrounding the trial area, a ringed city known as Versa Baelim, which was set up during the height of the Aeliid civilization. Throughout this whole time, hundreds of people went out there seeking the razor for themselves, only to be turned away by the Aeliids living there. However, this was all to change during the very early years of the First Era, as a hidden vampire would be able to find a way into the city unseen, and not long after they entered, the city would be completely overrun with undead, and with it would be thrown into complete chaos. Not long after that, the city of Versa Baelim suddenly and mysteriously disappeared without anyone knowing where it disappeared to or what had ultimately happened to it. However, it would go on to be found later on within the mountains of the eastern Nibelheim Basin up near Cheydinhal in Cyrodiil. Whilst this was going on, Mehrunes also went on to completely destroy another town known as Old Sulthur, a town that was said to be completely insignificant, run by House Sulthur, which was also said to be a group of nobodies. However, whilst the destruction of the town saw everyone being wiped out by the hands of Mehrunes Dagon, with many talons taking over the area, rending flesh and people screaming in complete agony in their final moments, one young member of the House, Sulthur Sil, would be saved by another Daedric Prince known as Vivek, knowing full well that his story did not end here, and he would go on to achieve things most people could not even fathom. Ultimately, Sulthur Sil would go on to ascend into godhood and become one of the Tribunal, the ruling gods who watched over all of Morrowind and the Dunmer people. While Sulthur Sil ascended into godhood, another Daedric Prince of Molag Bal, the Prince of Domination and Enslavement of Mortals, would go on to attack a settlement out within Valenwood named Gilverdale. Sulthur Sil, who was a living god now, knew they couldn't just sit back and let this attack slide, and instead sought out 8 of the most influential Daedric princes, which would include Mehrunes Dagon himself. Together, these 8 Daedric princes within the 3rd and 5th Reign's hand in the First Era 2920 would go on to set up a deal which would become known as the Cold Harbour Compact and consist of Sulthur Sil, Mehrunes Dagon, Azura, Boethia, Hermes Mora, Hircine, Malakath, Molag Bal, and Sheogorath. It is unknown what exactly this deal was, but it was believed that it was to stop any and all Daedric princes from meddling and messing around with the world of Nirn, and if they were to venture on it and cause any harm to the people living there, the Daedric prince responsible would have to pay a heavy price for it. Many of the princes stood strong with this new deal, but for Dagon, he saw this with complete indifference. To him, Sulthur Sil was still just a mortal who was not worthy of the title of a god, and in fact was the one meddling with affairs, and they should be crushed because of it. Also wanting to go against the compact immediately because he believed no one should be able to get in the way of his conquest of Nirn and trying to destroy it once and for all. This disdain for the conquest was quickly shown a few months later after a witch would witness a horrific massacre by an orcish raiding party. The witch named Turalla would believe that this was an attack sent by the Duke of Mournhold, Brindisi Dorom, who was a former lover, and it was done as a message to her as he would try and ultimately assassinate her. This was actually a false claim, but it didn't stop Turalla from taking action, as she would call forth the Prince of Destruction himself to destroy all of Mournhold and kill her former lover because of what she thought he had done. Dagon could not say no to this request and immediately launched the attack, burning the city almost immediately, as both Solthar Sil and Almalexia, another member of the tribunal, stood up to Mehrunes Dagon and challenged him on the battlefield. The area was lit with a barrage of flame as the two fought it out, but it was Almalexia who would be victorious, as she would plunge the sword named Hopespire into Dagon's flesh and carved him from within. Whilst that was happening, Solthar Sil would use God Bronze whips to lash the prince into submission, and whilst he was wounded, would go on to whisper an incantation which was essentially a Daedric's code to how they behave in their full nature. This was Dagon's Nimic, and when that happened, the prince was said to explode throughout all of time. Despite all of that, Dagon had the last laugh, as he would take a piece of Mournhold with him into his realm, which still contained many of the inhabitants intact. But regardless, Solthar Sil would go on to seal the planar doors between Nirn and Dagon's homeland of the Deadlands, blocking him from ever venturing out again, as further punishment for breaking the Cold Harbour Compact and showing the other princes what can happen if they go against it. Whilst this certainly hindered Dagon, he wasn't going to just sit back in his Deadlands and wait for something to happen, and in his time here, he would go on to make plans on getting back to Nirn to destroy it once and for all, coming up with new technology so he could jump from his dimension to theirs. Originally, this would be done through simple circular Oblivion portals, which would work relatively well, but later down the way would turn into full-on framed doorways, known as Oblivion Gates. During the start of the Second Era, Mehrunes Dagon was relatively quiet. However, many people had started up cults and devoted themselves to following the way of him, summoning Daedra and causing destruction. These could be seen within cults such as the Brotherhood of Destruction and the Bloodfire cult. With their help, Dagon would also set up a new plan to take over Nirn, as he would put into play some puppets of his own to fight for his cause. The Ruby Throne would be taken by some of these secret Reachmen Daedra worshippers who had made that deal with Mehrunes Dagon, and with them in power, the time of the Longhouse Emperors had begun under the original leadership of Emperor Dokurak. To solidify his family's rule, the family would go on to forge the Four Ambitions, four powerful weapons that would keep them in power. However, as these weapons got passed down to the next in line, Leovic would go on to legalize Daedric worship, which did not go down well at all, and would lead to a rebellion between him and Varan Aquilarius, ultimately leading to Varan slaying Leovic in the Imperial throne room. Just before his death, however, the Four Ambitions would be hidden by Leovic all over Tamriel, where they would be lost for a time anyway. Around this same time, the Psijic Order also was trying desperately to stop Mehrunes Dagon from being summoned in Tamriel. Here they would have to fight against the Order of the Waking Flame, who were desperately trying to summon Dagon's emissary and adopted son known as Zivali Moeth. This was successful as Moeth was weakened and banished back to Oblivion once again, and with the help of the Soldiers of the Void, were able to delay Dagon's arrival once again. Another powerful force would also turn to Dagon to help overthrow someone they disagreed with, and that was High Kin Lady Estra, who was becoming extremely displeased with the rise of the tolerant Queen Erin, as well as her Old Mary Dominion. With Dagon's help, Estra would summon Daedra warriors from the Deadlands within Dawnbreak's abandoned mine. This would lead to them setting it completely alight, murdering everyone that got in their way until they got into a skirmish with the first Oridion Marines, who ordered a mass evacuation. The Eyes of the Queen also halted the attack, killing the lead Dremora that was orchestrating it all. Estra continued on with her hit back against the Queen as she unleashed more upon the holy site of the Eight Divines known as Torinan, and then after that, her main target of Firsthold. Venturing into this city, the High Kinlord Rillis XIII would not realise her true intentions, and without any resistance would open up 4 Oblivion Gates across the city, sending in absolutely tons of Daedric warriors who tried to kidnap the Kinlord. However, Estra would eventually be slain by a hero of Tamriel who closed all of the Oblivion Gates in the process, but sadly nothing could save Firsthold as it was left as ruins. A Bosmeri village named Whisper Grove would also be attacked by Dagon's Razor Master, Urthas, as it would be overwhelmed by cultists and portals to the Deadlands were opened as well. The leader of the village and the guild known as the Undaunted, Gilrian, fought against the Daedra and eventually killed Urthas with the help of others, but the portal was still open. Dagon made an offer, stating he would seal the portal if Gilrian agreed to meet him in the Deadlands. Gilrian agreed with the offer and the portal was indeed closed, but there was a catch. Dagon would go on to offer Gilrian the means to survive in the Deadlands, offering them the role of Razor Master. Gilrian's husband, however, launched missions to try and save them from the Deadlands, but these were failures at the beginning. But eventually it worked, as the adventurers were able to slay Dagon's lieutenants and rescue Gilrian, closing the portal behind them when they got back to Nirn. But Gilrian would always worry that Mehrunes Dagon would hunt them down, especially considering the fact that they had slain one of his best and ran away with his precious Daedric weapon of the Razor. Later in that era, the Vestige would go on to uncover a secret dungeon which consisted of the fallen Longhouse Emperor's dynasty, undergoing a new name of the Cult of the Order of the Waking Flame. It was here where the Vestige learnt of the 4 ambitions and that they were located all over Tamriel. But now they had to get them quickly, as the High Priest of the Order, Urtus Vendachia, was also on the hunt for them, and if he were to beat them to it, the Order would be able to take the throne all over again. But at the same time, this group found out that these weren't actually weapons, but were instead people who had been empowered at birth and were to be later sacrificed by someone seeking their power. Vendachia would go on to launch massive attacks on relevant places to capture the known ambitions, who were being moved about as much as possible to keep safe, until they eventually got to the sturdy Imperial-built Fort Redmane. For the most part, the army was defeated. However, Vendachia and a powerful group of cultists broke into the fort with portal magic. Reaching one of the ambitions, Destron, he would be sacrificed by Vendachia, who grabbed his power and tried to merge Tamriel into the Deadlands, which helped Mehrunes Dagon to appear on the scene and assault the fort himself. Vendachia would eventually be slain, which thankfully ended the merge and banished Dagon once again, but with the other ambitions out there, Dagon was still acting on making it so his realm would fully merge with Nirn. In the events following the destruction of the fort, more battles continued out within Fort Sundercliff, which again would lead it to being completely destroyed. Soon after, the merging process would take place. However, before Dagon could be successful, the Vestige and a ton of mortal warriors and lesser Daedra who weren't loyal to Dagon interrupted the ritual. Together with the help of the power of the ambitions, they would be able to weaken the prince with his own Nimic, and eventually the Vestige would be able to destroy Dagon's physical form and was once again banished to the furthest corner of the Deadlands. This immediately stopped the merging of the realms once again, as the world of Nirn went back to normal, or a sense of normality anyway. At the start of the Third Era, around the same time of the Interregnum, a member of the Doreni clan and renowned Daedra summoner known as Chimera Gregan would also go on to make a pact with the Daedric Prince. Unlike the other people who had summoned him before, Chimera knew that whatever oath he made with him, he would not follow through. He would take the power of the prince and turn his back on him. This was because he wore armor of the Savior's hide, which protected him from blows of Oathbreakers, which Dagon officially was now after everything he had done over the previous eras. With Dagon being hindered by this, Chimera had enough time to banish him completely, sending him back to Oblivion by mentioning the prince's Nimic. Dagon wasn't going to fall for that, however, and when he was sucked into the void, he would channel his power into a curse. Ultimately, Gregan desired to live forever in his hometown among the happy voices of his friends and countrymen. With that request, Dagon took it literally, and as he was falling into the void, he would also drag Chimera and the entirety of his hometown of Sicily Island into Oblivion with him, and as soon as they got there, everyone was slain instantly, apart from Chimera, who was still aging, but cursed to live forever, still surrounded by the voices of his friends who had now been slaughtered by the prince, who gave him his last wish. This plane of Oblivion would go on to be named as the Chimera of Desolation. A few hundred years later, Dagon would get involved with an imperial battle mage known as Jagar, who had planned to impose as Emperor Uriel Septim VII, banish him, and take the imperial throne for himself. Utilizing the Staff of Chaos, this plan went perfectly, as Uriel Septim and Talin Warhaft, the general of the Imperial Guard, were going to be banished from the realm into one of Dagon's dark prisons, somewhere out within Oblivion, where they would be subjected to nothing but inexplicable and haunting nightmares all of the time. With Tharn on the throne, this period of history would become known as the Imperial Simulacrum. With Tharn now in charge, Dagon was allowed to do as much as he wanted from behind the scenes, knowing that Tharn was in his debt and had the most power all over Tamriel. Here Dagon drew his attention to the Battlespire, a battle mage training facility that was under Imperial rule. With that being the focus, Dagon's adopted son, Zivalai Moath, took it upon himself to get Tharn to focus his efforts on making the spire fall completely. After all, the spire had been something Dagon had been trying to hit many times over the years, but none of those attacks were successful. But with Tharn's help, this could now be possible. With that, Dagon was free to send in all of his forces into the spire, as they would catch all of those within completely by surprise, and no one from the Imperials told them anything that was happening. All because Tharn wanted Dagon to succeed, as it would free him from the competition of all of the other Imperial battle mages of Tamriel who were going for his position. Completely unaware that any of this was happening, two apprentice battle mages would go on to enter the battle spire for their final trial, only to discover that the spire had fallen. One of the apprentices, however, would go on to be captured by the Daedra and brought to Dagon's personal hunting lodge and face to face with the prince himself. The other would go on a trip through the spire and the plains of Oblivion to search not only for his fellow apprentice, but also a way back to Tamriel, fighting off all of the Daedric forces in their way. After a grueling journey collecting magical artifacts to hit back against the Daedric Prince responsible for this attack, the apprentice would meet with Dagon within his hunting lodge. Dagon laughed at this intruder, believing they were just another weak mortal, unworthy of coming face to face with him. However, the apprentice revealed all of the magical gear that was fundamental to taking on Dagon, and with that, he got worried and took up arms to fight this battle mage. Just before the attack, however, the apprentice would summon the ruler of the Shade Perilous realm of Oblivion to distract Dagon, and with his back turned, struck Dagon and sent him back into the void once again, as he would be compressed into an ever smaller volume before vanishing once and for all. With Dagon now going from the picture once again, Jagar Tharn had lost all of his backing and support, and with it was destined to fail. The year was 399 of the Third Era, and a single being known as the Eternal Champion had finally gathered together all 8 pieces of the Staff of Chaos, the very thing that had banished the Emperor in the first place and helped Tharn get into power. Together with a powerful artifact owned by Tharn known as the Jewel of Fire, the champion would release a massive powerful surge of energy which would ultimately destroy the battle mage, ending his rule of terror once and for all. With that surge of energy, it would also go on to open a gate which freed Uriel Septim from Dagon's prison, also destroying much of the palace's interior as well. With the true Emperor back on the throne, everyone closely linked to Tharn and Daedric summoning would be hunted down and wiped out for what they had done to the Empire. Being defeated yet again, Mehrunes Dagon was now filled with rage, more rage than he had ever felt before in his life, wanting to tear down the Empire completely because of what they had done to him and his plans within the Battlespire. And it wouldn't be long before Dagon would come back onto the scene. Before any major events took place, Dagon also appeared once again within 405 of the Third Era, as he would be summoned by an agent of the faction known as the Blades within the Iliac Bay region between High Rock and Hammerfell. Appearing to this agent, the prince would go on to offer them the power they wanted in exchange for killing a Frost Daedra in a nearby dungeon. With that done, they would receive Mehrunes' chosen artifact of the Mehrunes Razor as their reward. 25 years later, after that event, and the hero known as the Nerevarine would stumble across Dagon's shrine off the coast of Vardenfell, and when there, summoned the prince. Similar in style to the agent, the prince offered them a test to see if they were worthy and sent them out on a quest to retrieve his razor, which had supposedly been stolen by an unworthy elf and lost within a tomb. With that, the Nerevarine would set out on this trial, would succeed, and was allowed to keep the razor after the prince restored it to its former glory. After that, Dagon continued to stay within his plane of existence, plotting his revenge for what the Empire had done to him and his ambitions. As the Third Era went into the mid-5th century, it was time for him to appear once again, and here everyone would see what he was fully capable of. For years, Dagon had been working from within the shadows, making plans with ambitious elves, humans, and anyone that wanted his power to overthrow someone or something. But after Tharn's defeat and after the events within the Battlespire, Dagon had decided this was not the best way of dealing with things, and in fact would seek to destroy the planet of Nirn on his own, utilising his Daedric forces and cult worshippers as well as his sheer strength instead of plotting behind the scenes. Whilst Nirn was of course the target, it was the Septim Empire that was the main target, as he was desperate for revenge, and also their death would mean he could easily expand out all over the lands. With that said, Dagon did form an alliance with an Altmer wizard known as Mankar Camoran. Bringing forward his tome of the Mysterium Xarxes, Camoran would use it to found the Order of the Mythic Dawn, a Daedric cult who shared the same ambitions as Dagon and wanted to bring about the end of the Septim bloodline and recreate a mythic era where they believed Dagon would rule over all of them. With the Mythic Dawn being fully set up, it was their task to hunt down all of the Emperor's bloodline and wipe them out for good. Once they were out of the way, the full Oblivion invasion could take place. Amazingly, the Mythic Dawn did not take too long to hunt down the Emperor and were able to assassinate him whilst he and his guards, along with a mysterious prisoner, tried to escape from the Imperial prison. With Uriel Septim VII now dead, the Divine Dragonfires, a symbol that the Emperor was alive and well, but also was used as a ward against the planes of Oblivion, would be fully extinguished, as no heir was readily available, as 3 had also been wiped out at the same time. With the fires now out, portals and Oblivion gates opened up all over Cyrodiil and the rest of Tamriel, as thousands of Daedra poured through, with the first big attack being within the city of Kvatch, which was ultimately turned to ash. After the battle, Oblivion gates would continue to be opened more by the Mythic Dawn, enabling Daedra to just roam free all over the lands of Tamriel, whilst the main Daedra armies attacked the major cities. Despite thinking the Mythic Dawn had wiped out all of Uriel Septim's heirs, there was one hidden away that many did not even know of, that being Martin Septim, who was found by the hero of Kvatch. With the hero's help, they would venture all throughout the plains of Oblivion, hitting back against the Daedric forces and dealing major blows not only to the Mythic Dawn, but to Mehrunes Dagon himself. Eventually, the hero would wipe out Mankar Camoran, bringing an end to the Mythic Dawn, leading to a final grand-scale attack by the Daedra on the Imperial city itself. Here, Dagon turned up himself, trying to stop Martin Septim from relighting the Dragonfires and bringing an end to the Oblivion invasion. Dagon was huge, showing up with multiple arms and weapons, but thanks to the power within the Emperor's amulet, named the Amulet of Kings, Martin would be able to summon the god of Akatosh and merge with them into a single dragon entity that would banish Dagon back into the Oblivion once again, also wiping out all of the Daedric forces as well. Martin, however, would be sacrificed in the process, as well as the Amulet of Kings, meaning that there was no more Dragonfire or bloodline left. However, Akatosh's involvement merging with the bloodline probably meant that a new ward had been set up, one that didn't necessarily need the power of Dragonfire anymore, or an emperor to continue their bloodline forever. The Oblivion forces would not be a problem anytime soon anyway, and now one of Tamriel's most bloody and brutal eras had come to an end. It was now the turn of the 4th era, the time for change, and finally the people of Nirn did not have to worry about the meddlings of Mehrunes Dagon any longer, or so they thought anyway. Despite being banished for what looked like the final time, Mehrunes Dagon reappeared once again within the northern part of Tamriel within Skyrim. Dagon was still adamant that one day he would take over all of Nirn and destroy it once and for all, and no barrier was going to stop his Daedric forces. With this, he sought out a new opportunity, as he had heard about the appearance of a new Dragonborn, and with their help he would be able to use them for his own advantage. Immediately he acted upon this, as he would reach out to certain individuals through dreams to try and get those people to form a new cult. This worked on a Dunmer named Volnus, as he would go on to revive all of the Mythic Dawn once again in the year of 200 of the 4th era. With them now set up, Volnus led them to a buried Mythic Dawn temple in Skyrim, where they were tasked with reconstructing a dormant Oblivion gate. This gate would lead directly to Dagon's Deadlands, and the gate was cleansed with personal blood sacrifices. A year later, Dagon's razor found itself within Skyrim. However, it was now broken into 3 pieces. After discovering the first piece through the Mythic Dawn Museum in Dawnstar, the Dragonborn would also find the other 2 pieces, and without hesitation, Dagon reached out to them and offered them the full fixed razor, but it would come at a price. To receive it, they would have to murder the museum's proprietor, Silas. If the Dragonborn were to do this act, it would be a big win for Dagon, as he had a powerful being under his rule to some extent. Around this same time, however, the Dragonborn would also receive word about the activities of Volnus and the Mythic Dawn cult, and was told he needed to stop them in their tracks. Initially, the Dragonborn would be able to stop the cult from retrieving the Great Wilkin Stone, hindering them slightly. However, Volnus would be able to grab it eventually, and with it, he would be able to open the gate, also utilizing the Dragonborn as they possessed the power of Akatosh, which could reverse the seal that was created to stop the Oblivion Crisis. As the portal was set up, there was no way of ever closing it, as the stone had now been disposed of, and even if Dagon was to be destroyed, he could just come back again and keep trying his invasion. Regardless of this fact, the Dragonborn would venture into the Deadlands and would go on to defeat 2 crucial targets who were serving as the heralds for the initial assault on Tamriel. With that done, the Vigil of Stendarr being the god of mercy, would arrive at the portal and guard it for as long as possible to make sure no Daedric attack could ever get further into Tamriel, and Mehrunes Dagon would have to accept his defeat while sitting within his own realm. Ultimately though, Mehrunes Dagon has only one purpose, and that is destruction. No matter how many times he is defeated, he is only programmed to do this one act, and Nirn and the Empire are his only targets. No matter how many wards are in place, no matter how many times he is defeated, he will always return with a new plan, but with the goal always being the same. Who knows what he plans within the future and what other people are out there to do his bidding, and who knows what else he's got up to within the Second Era, as that is still being discovered. But for now, this has been the story so far of the brutal Daedric Prince from Oblivion, Mehrunes Dagon. I want to say a huge thank you for watching this video, as I've been wanting to make more Elder Scrolls content for some time, and with the Oblivion remake out now, I thought this was the perfect opportunity. Let me know what else you'd like to see from this game or other games of this type, and make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. A big thanks to my patrons for their endless support, especially when my schedule has been a bit poor recently. These include my small fishes, my big fishes, Noxvox, Ben Chance and Jono, my YouTube channel Wise One, Sith Lord 906, Video Gamer 75 and Planet Nanotarium, my Shark Jason X117, my Megalodons, Sinus and Hazy Thoughts, and my incredible Starfish Nanohertz. But that is all for now. Thank you all for watching once again, and I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.